Captain Lee Minho stood at the observation window of Harmony Station, watching 12 different species of alien ships dock at the massive space platform. Each vessel looked completely different from the others. Some were smooth and silver-like, teardrops. Others were angular and dark like floating mountains. A few pulsed with strange lights that hurt his eyes to look at directly. This was it, the most important moment in human history. After 50 years of cautious contact with alien civilizations, Earth had finally been invited to join the Galactic Peace Council. Minho was chosen to lead humanity's first diplomatic mission to negotiate a formal treaty. He checked his watch. The opening ceremony would begin in 2 hours. His team had trained for 3 years for this moment, learning about alien cultures, customs, and the complex politics that kept 12 different species from destroying each other. "Captain, the Astari delegation has arrived," said Park Ji-hyo, his second in command. She walked up beside him at the window. "Their ship is beautiful. Look at that." Minho followed her gaze to see an elegant vessel that seemed to be made of crystal and light. It moved through space like a graceful dancer, completely silent. The Astari were known throughout the galaxy for their advanced technology and long lifespans. They lived for hundreds of years and were said to have telepathic abilities. "Have you ever seen an Astari before?" Ji-hyo asked. "Only in recordings," Minho replied. "They rarely leave their homeworlds. The fact that they're here means this treaty is more important than we thought." The two humans watched as the Astari ship docked with a soft hiss of air seals connecting. Through the station's transparent aluminum walls, they could see figures moving inside the ship, but the glass was too reflective to make out details. "Captain," called Nam Hyun-woo from his communication station, "all delegations are requesting permission to board. Should I give the green light?" "Yes, but keep the security protocols active," Minho said. "We want to be welcoming but not stupid." Over the next hour, representatives from 12 alien civilizations boarded Harmony Station. The Zephyrians floated rather than walked, their gas-filled bodies drifting through the corridors like living clouds. The Corvin delegation came in mechanical suits because they breathed methane instead of oxygen. The Tlaxians looked almost human, except for their bright blue skin and 4 arms. Each group was assigned quarters in different sections of the station. The universal translators had been tested and retested. Everything was ready for the formal negotiations to begin. But first, there would be a welcome reception in the main hall. Minho adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform and walked toward the reception area with his team. The hall had been designed to accommodate all 12 species, with different atmospheric zones, gravity settings, and lighting conditions. It was like walking into 12 different worlds at once. The human delegation entered together, and immediately all conversation stopped. Hundreds of alien eyes turned toward them. Some beings had 2 eyes, others had dozens. A few seemed to see with organs that weren't eyes at all. "Remember," Ji-hyo whispered, "we smile, we bow, we don't touch anyone unless they initiate contact first." Minho nodded and stepped forward. As the lead human diplomat, he would speak first. "Honored representatives," he began, his words automatically translated into 12 different languages by hidden speakers throughout the hall. "On behalf of humanity and the planet Earth, I thank you for this opportunity to join your council. We come in peace, seeking friendship and cooperation among all our peoples." Various sounds filled the hall. Some species clapped with hands or claws. Others made musical humming noises. A few stamped their feet or tentacles on the floor. It was the most beautiful and strange sound Minho had ever heard. As the formal greetings continued, Minho found his attention drawn to the Astari delegation. There were 5 of them, tall and elegant, with pale skin that seemed to glow softly in the station's lights. Their hair was long and silver, and they moved with a fluid grace that made them seem like they were floating. 4 of the Astari stood together in a tight group, speaking quietly among themselves in their musical language. But one stood apart, looking around the hall with obvious curiosity. This Astari was shorter than the others, with darker hair that had streaks of blue running through it. Unlike her companions, she seemed genuinely interested in the other species present. Their eyes met across the room. The Astari woman tilted her head slightly, studying him with an expression of open curiosity. Then she did something that surprised him completely. She smiled. It was a human gesture. Astari didn't smile in their culture. They communicated emotions telepathically, not through facial expressions. But this one had learned to smile, probably, from studying human behavior. Minho found himself smiling back. After the formal reception ended, delegates began to mingle in smaller groups. Minho was speaking with the Corvin representative about trade agreements when someone tapped him gently on the shoulder. He turned to find the young Astari woman standing behind him. Up close, she was even more striking. Her eyes were a deep violet color and her skin had an almost pearl-like quality that reflected the station's lights. "Captain Lee Minho," she said, pronouncing his name carefully. Her voice was soft and musical, with a slight accent that made the common language sound like poetry. "I am Yuna of the Astari delegation. I hope I am not interrupting something important." "Not at all," Minho said, bowing slightly in the Earth style. "It's an honor to meet you. Are you enjoying the station?" "Very much," Yuna replied. "I have been studying human culture for many years, but this is my first time meeting humans in person. You are more complicated than our records suggested." "Complicated how?" Yuna glanced around the room, watching humans interact with various alien species. "Your people adapt quickly. You change your behavior to match those around you. With the Corvin, you become more formal. With the Zephyrians, you become more gentle. But you remain fundamentally human. It is fascinating." They talked for another 20 minutes about human diplomacy, Astari technology, and the challenges of bringing 12 different civilizations together for a common purpose. Minho found himself genuinely enjoying the conversation. Yuna was intelligent, curious, and surprisingly funny. She asked questions that showed she had been paying attention to small details that other species missed. When the reception finally ended, Yuna bowed in the human style before leaving with her delegation. "That was interesting," Jihyo said, walking up beside Minho as he watched the Astari group disappear down a corridor. "She seemed different from the others." "Different how?" "More individual. The other Astari move and speak like they're all connected somehow. But she acts independently, like a human would." Minho nodded. He had noticed the same thing. Most alien species they had encountered thought and acted as groups. Individual choice was rare among the stars. But Yuna seemed to have developed her own unique personality. As he headed back to his quarters for the night, Minho found himself looking forward to the next day's negotiations. Not just for the sake of the treaty, but for the chance to speak with Yuna again. The negotiations began badly on the second day. The Corvin delegation wanted exclusive trading rights for rare metals. The Zephyrians insisted on restricting military ship movements through their territory. The Talaxians demanded that all member species adopt their calendar system for official business. Minho sat at the human section of the massive circular negotiation table, watching 12 different species argue through their universal translators. Everyone wanted something different from the peace treaty. Finding common ground seemed impossible. The mining rights in the Centauri system belonged to species who arrived there first, the lead Corvin delegate said, his mechanical voice coming through the translator with electronic crackles. "Arrival means nothing," replied the Zephyrian representative, her cloud-like body shifting colors as she spoke. "We were using those systems for gas collection long before solid beings could survive in space." The arguments continued for hours. Minho noticed that the Astari delegation rarely spoke. When they did, it was always as a group, with one member speaking while the others nodded in perfect agreement. All except Yuna, who seemed to have her own opinions about the various proposals. During the lunch break, most delegates returned to their species-specific dining areas. Humans ate in the standard atmospheric zone, while other species had their meals in customized environments that matched their homeworlds. Minho was reviewing negotiation notes when Yuna appeared at his table. "May I sit with you?" she asked. "I find human food interesting." "Of course," Minho said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "Though I should warn you, Space station food isn't the best example of human cuisine. Yuna sat down gracefully and examined the meal that had been prepared for her by the station's food processors. The Astari didn't need to eat as often as humans, but their biology was similar enough that they could digest most human foods. I wanted to apologize for my delegation's silence during the morning session, she said. My people prefer to observe and discuss privately before making public statements. That's fine, Minho replied. Every species has their own negotiation style. We're all still learning how to work together. But some of us learn faster than others, Yuna said quietly. She glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned forward slightly. May I ask you something personal, Captain? Sure. Do humans ever feel disconnected from their own people? It was an odd question. Minho studied her face, trying to understand what she was really asking. Sometimes. Why? Among my people, we share thoughts and emotions through telepathic connections. We rarely disagree because we can feel what others are feeling. But She paused, looking uncomfortable. I find myself having thoughts and feelings that don't match the group. Is that normal for humans? Minho set down his fork and looked at her more carefully. Yuna, are you saying you can't connect telepathically with other Astari? I can connect, she said quietly. But I choose not to sometimes. I prefer to think my own thoughts. My delegation finds this disturbing. It sounds perfectly human to me, Minho said with a smile. Individual thinking is one of our species' greatest strengths. It's also one of our biggest problems. They talked throughout the lunch break about the differences between collective thinking and individual choice. Yuna seemed fascinated by the concept that humans could disagree with each other and still remain friends and allies. When negotiations resumed in the afternoon, disaster struck. The universal translators began malfunctioning during a heated argument between the Corvin and Talaxian delegations. First, words began coming out in the wrong languages. Then the translators started mixing up species entirely, so that Corvin words were being spoken in Zephyrian voices. Within minutes, complete chaos erupted in the negotiation hall. Delegates were shouting in their native languages, unable to understand each other. Some species took the malfunction as a sign of sabotage and began making threatening gestures. Security alarms started blaring throughout the station. Everyone remained calm, Minho announced, but his words came out as a series of electronic beeps and whistles through the broken translator system. The chief technician, Dr. Cho Tai-hyun, rushed into the hall with his repair team. The main translation, computer has crashed, he called out in Korean. It will take at least 6 hours to rebuild the language matrices. 6 hours. That would kill the negotiations completely. Several species had already indicated they might leave the station if progress wasn't made quickly. But then something unexpected happened. Yuna stood up from her seat and walked over to Minho. She placed her hand gently on his arm, and suddenly, he felt a warm sensation in his mind. Not words exactly, but emotions and images that conveyed meaning more clearly than speech. She was showing him that she could communicate telepathically with humans, something that wasn't supposed to be possible. Between different species, the feeling was strange but not unpleasant, like having someone whisper directly into his thoughts. Can you understand me? Her voice seemed to say inside his head. Yes, he thought back, and was amazed when she smiled and nodded. I can bridge communications between species for a short time, she explained telepathically. But it will be exhausting, and I cannot do it with all 12 species at once. Minho looked around the hall at the chaos and confusion. Without the translators, the peace treaty would fail. Earth would lose its chance to join the galactic community. But if Yuna could help them communicate, even partially, they might be able to keep the negotiations alive. What do you need from me? He asked. Trust, she replied. For the next 4 hours, Yuna performed a miracle. She moved from group to group around the negotiation hall, using her telepathic abilities to translate not just words but emotions and intentions between species. When the Corvin delegates were frustrated, she helped the Zephyrians understand the feeling behind their anger. When the Tlaxians made a cultural reference that didn't translate properly, She conveyed the meaning through shared images and sensations. Minho worked beside her, using hand gestures, drawings, and basic mathematics to communicate with species that Yuna couldn't reach telepathically. Together, they kept the negotiations moving forward when everything should have fallen apart. By the time Dr. Cho's team finished repairing the translators, more progress had been made than in the previous 3 days combined. Species that had been arguing were now finding compromises. The Corvin agreed to share mining rights in exchange for Zephyrian gas processing technology. The Tlaxians offered to adopt a neutral calendar system that accommodated all species' needs. "How did you do that?" Jihyo asked Minho as the delegates took a dinner break. "I've never seen negotiations move so smoothly." Minho glanced over at Yuna, who was sitting with her delegation. She looked exhausted from hours of telepathic translation, but she gave him a small smile when their eyes met. "Sometimes you have to communicate on a deeper level," he said, "beyond just words." But even as he said it, Minho knew something had changed between him and Yuna during those hours of mental connection. He had felt her thoughts and emotions as clearly as his own. He had seen her memories of growing up on the Astari homeworld, feeling isolated and different from her people, and she had seen his memories too. His childhood on Earth, his military training, his dedication to bringing peace between species. She had felt his loneliness, his sense of duty, and something else he hadn't expected her to discover. She had felt that he was beginning to care about her in a way that went far beyond diplomatic cooperation. As the day ended and delegates returned to their quarters, Minho wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The mental connection with Yuna had been necessary to save the negotiations, but it had also revealed feelings he wasn't sure he was ready to acknowledge, feelings that could destroy everything they were trying to accomplish. 3 days after the translator crisis, Minho couldn't stop thinking about the mental connection he had shared with Yuna. During meetings, he found himself watching her across the negotiation table. When she spoke, he listened not just to her words but to the emotions behind them. The other Astari delegates seemed to notice the change in Yuna's behavior. She had always been the most independent member of their group, but now she appeared to be deliberately avoiding their telepathic communications. Instead, she focused on verbal discussions with representatives from other species. "Captain," Park Jihyo said, approaching Minho after a particularly long session on trade regulations, "we need to talk privately." They walked to Minho's quarters, a simple room with a desk, a bed, and a window overlooking the star field beyond the station. Jihyo closed the door and activated the privacy shield that would prevent anyone from listening to their conversation. "What's going on between you and the Astari delegate?" she asked directly. Minho sat down at his desk and rubbed his tired eyes. "What do you mean?" "Don't play games with me, Minho. I've known you for 8 years. You're acting different around her and she's acting different around you. The other delegates are starting to notice." "We developed a working relationship during the translator crisis," Minho said carefully. "She helped save the negotiations." "It's more than that," Jihyo pressed. "The way you look at her, the way she looks at you, this could be a serious problem." Before Minho could respond, his door chimed. "Captain," came Nam Hyunwoo's voice over the communication system. "There's a priority message for you from Earth Command." "Put it through," Minho said. The wall screen activated, showing the stern face of Admiral Song Min-kyung, Minho's former commander and mentor. Her expression was serious, which usually meant bad news. "Captain Lee," she said without pleasantries, "I'm sending you classified intelligence about the Astari delegation. Review it immediately and contact me within 24 hours. The transmission ended and a data file appeared on Minho's personal computer. He opened it with his security codes, and what he read made his blood run cold. "What is it?" Jihyo asked, seeing his expression. Minho turned the screen so she could read the report. It detailed classified information about Yuna's background that had been discovered through intelligence networks within Astari space. Yuna wasn't just an independent thinker among her people. She was an exile. According to the report, Yuna had been designated as mentally unstable by Astari authorities because of her refusal to participate in their collective consciousness. On their home world, individuals who couldn't or wouldn't maintain telepathic connections with the group were considered dangerous threats to social stability. The Astari government had sent her on the diplomatic mission expecting her to die in space. It was a convenient way to eliminate someone they considered a defective member of their society. They never expected her to survive the journey to Harmony Station, let alone participate successfully in negotiations. But the most shocking part of the report was the final paragraph. Astari intelligence had been monitoring Yuna's telepathic activities during the negotiations. They knew about her mental connection with Minho, and they were planning to use it as evidence of her dangerous influence on other species. They're going to recall her, Jihyo said quietly. And when they do, they'll execute her, Minho finished, or worse. The report mentions something called consciousness adjustment therapy. It sounds like they'll destroy her individual personality and turn her into a mindless drone. Minho stared at the report, feeling a mixture of anger and fear that surprised him with its intensity. He had known Yuna for only a few days, but the thought of her being harmed or destroyed filled him with rage. There's something else, Jihyo said, scrolling through the intelligence data. Look at this section about Astari reproduction. Minho read the paragraph she indicated. Astari didn't form emotional bonds the way humans did. Their species reproduced through technological processes that combined genetic material from multiple individuals. The concept of romantic love between two specific beings was completely foreign to their culture. She doesn't even understand what she's feeling, Jihyo said softly. To her, the connection you two have developed is just an interesting new experience. She doesn't realize it could be considered love. That evening, Minho found Yuna in the station's observation deck, a quiet area where delegates often went to think or relax. She was standing at the large window looking out at the stars. Her reflection in the glass looked sad and lonely. "May I join you?" he asked. "Of course," she replied without turning around. "I was thinking about home, about how different the stars look from here." They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, then Yuna spoke again. "Captain, may I ask you something about human emotions?" "Sure. What does it feel like to care about someone more than duty requires?" The question caught him off guard. He studied her reflection in the window, trying to understand what she was really asking. "It feels like that person becomes more important than your own safety," he said slowly. "Like their happiness matters more than your own. Like you would do anything to protect them, even if it meant breaking rules or disappointing other people." Yuna nodded thoughtfully. "I think I'm beginning to understand that feeling, but it frightens me." "Why?" "Because among my people, caring too much about individuals is considered a mental illness. If I felt such emotions for another Astari, I would be sent for correction therapy. But you are human, so perhaps it is acceptable to feel this way about you." Minho's heart stopped. She was talking about loving him, but she didn't even have words for it in her language. "Yuna," he said carefully, "there's something you should know about your government's plans." He told her everything he had learned from the intelligence report, about her exile status, about the expectations that she would die in space, about the monitoring of her telepathic activities. As he spoke, her reflection in the window grew paler and more strained. "I suspected something like this," she said when he finished. "My assignment to this mission never made sense. I was told it was an honor, but I felt like I was being punished." "What will you do?" Minho asked. Yuna turned away from the window to face him directly. Her violet eyes were bright with unshed tears, another human expression she had learned to use. "I don't know," she admitted. "If I return to Astari space, they will destroy everything that makes me who I am. But if I stay here, I will be abandoning my people forever." "You could ask for asylum," Minho suggested. "Earth would protect you." "And spend the rest of my life as a refugee, never able to return home, never able to see my family again?" She shook her head. "I'm not sure I'm brave enough for that." "What if there was another option?" Minho asked. "What do you mean?" Minho took a deep breath. He was about to say something that could destroy his career and potentially ruin the peace negotiations, but he couldn't stop himself. What if we could convince the other species to support you? What if we could make your right to individual choice part of the peace treaty itself? Yuna stared at him in amazement. You would risk everything you've worked for just to help me? Yes, Minho said without hesitation. Because that feeling you asked me about? The one where someone becomes more important than duty? That's how I feel about you. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Yuna reached out and took his hand, the first physical contact they had shared since the mental connection during the translator crisis. I feel it too, she whispered. This caring that goes beyond duty. I think humans call it love. As they stood together in the observation deck, holding hands and looking out at the stars, neither of them noticed the small recording device that had been hidden in the room. Commander Daewon had been monitoring the human delegation's activities, suspecting that something improper was developing between Minho and the alien delegate. He had just captured evidence that could destroy both their careers and potentially derail the entire peace treaty. The attack came without warning during the fourth week of negotiations. Minho was in the main conference hall, reviewing the latest draft of the peace treaty with delegates from 6 different species, when the station's emergency alarms began blaring. Red warning lights flashed throughout the corridors, and the automated voice system announced, "Security breach. All personnel report to emergency stations immediately." Through the hall's transparent walls, Minho could see explosions lighting up the space around the station. Small, fast attack ships were firing energy weapons at the docking ports where the diplomatic vessels were anchored. "Pure Galaxy terrorists," announced Commander Daewon over the communication system. "They're trying to destroy the diplomatic ships to prevent the treaty from being signed." Pure Galaxy was an extremist organization that operated throughout several star systems. They believed that different species should never cooperate or communicate with each other. To them, the peace treaty represented everything wrong with modern galactic civilization. "All delegates to emergency shelters," Daewon's voice continued. "Security teams prepare for possible boarding attempts." Chaos erupted in the conference hall as representatives from 12 species tried to reach safety. The Zephyrians moved, too slowly, their gas-filled bodies unable to navigate quickly through the corridors. The Corvin in their mechanical suits couldn't fit through some of the emergency passages. Several species began arguing about which shelter areas were safe for their particular biology. Minho found Yuna in the crowd and grabbed her hand. "This way," he said, leading her toward the nearest emergency shelter. "Stay close to me." They ran through corridors filled with panicking beings, dodging fallen ceiling panels and sparking electrical systems where the terrorist weapons had damaged the station's infrastructure. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of energy weapons fire as Pure Galaxy fighters attempted to board the station. The emergency shelter was a reinforced compartment in the station's core, designed to protect occupants from space combat and radiation exposure. But as they reached the shelter entrance, a group of armed figures in black combat suits blocked their path. "Humans and aliens working together," said the leader, his voice distorted by his helmet's communication system. "Disgusting." He raised his weapon toward Yuna. Without thinking, Minho threw himself in front of her, but before the terrorist could fire, Yuna moved with incredible speed. She had never mentioned being trained in combat, but her movements were fluid and deadly. Her hand struck the terrorist's weapon with precise force, shattering it into pieces. A spinning kick sent him crashing into the corridor wall. 2 more terrorists tried to attack her, but she disabled them both in seconds with techniques that seemed to combine martial arts with her species' natural grace. "Get to the shelter," she told Minho as she finished with the last attacker. "I'll hold them here." "I'm not leaving you," Minho replied, helping her drag the unconscious terrorists away from the shelter entrance. They made it into the emergency shelter just as another explosion rocked the station. Inside the reinforced compartment, about 30 beings from various species huddled together, including Park Ji-hyo and several other human delegates. "The main reactor has been damaged," reported Dr. Cho Tae-hyun, who was monitoring the station's systems from a portable computer. "If the Pure Galaxy forces breach the reactor core, the explosion will destroy everything within 1,000,000 kilometers." The beings in the shelter looked at each other with fear and desperation. Several species began arguing about evacuation procedures, but there was nowhere to run. The terrorist attack had disabled most of the escape pods, and the remaining diplomatic ships were under heavy fire. As hours passed, the situation grew worse. The station's life support systems were failing in several sections. The artificial gravity fluctuated, causing beings to float randomly around the shelter. Emergency power was running low. Minho sat beside Yuna in a corner of the shelter, both of them exhausted from the stress and fear. Around them, representatives from 12 different civilizations waited to learn if they would live or die together. "I want to tell you something," Minho said quietly so only Yuna could hear. "In case we don't make it out of here." "What is it?" Minho looked around the shelter at the beings who had been brought together by the hope of peace, now facing destruction. Because others couldn't accept cooperation between species, he thought about his life on Earth, his military career, his dreams of building bridges between civilizations. And he thought about the impossible love he had discovered with an alien woman who was supposed to be his enemy according to some, and who faced execution by her own people for the crime of thinking independently. "I wish I could marry her," he whispered, not even realizing he had spoken the words out loud. To his complete shock, Yuna turned to him with tears in her violet eyes and said clearly, in perfect Korean, "Yes." The word hung in the air between them like a promise and a prayer. Several other beings in the shelter had heard her response, including Nam Hyunwoo, who was sitting nearby with his portable recording equipment. "You've been learning Korean?" Minho asked in amazement. "I have been learning many human languages," Yuna replied, still speaking Korean with only a slight accent. "I wanted to understand your people better. I wanted to understand you better. But marriage, your people don't have that concept." "My people don't have many concepts that I find important," Yuna said. "Individual choice, personal freedom, the right to love someone just because you choose to love them. These are human ideas. But I think they are better ideas than the ones I was raised with." Around them, other beings in the shelter began to take notice of their conversation. The universal translators were working again, so everyone could understand what they were saying. "This is what we're fighting for," said the lead Tlaxian delegate suddenly. "The right to choose our own paths, to form connections across the boundaries of species and culture. The pure galaxy terrorists want to keep us all separate and afraid," added a Zephyrian representative. "But look at us now. We're different species, but we're all the same in our fear and hope. If we survive this," said the Corvan delegate, "we must make sure the treaty protects not just our civilizations, but our right to care about each other as individuals." For the next several hours, as they waited to learn their fate, the beings in the emergency shelter talked about love, friendship, and cooperation in ways they had never discussed in the formal negotiations. Barriers broke down as species shared their fears and dreams with each other. Minho and Yuna sat together, holding hands and talking about the future they might never have. She told him about her childhood on the Astari homeworld, about feeling different and alone among her own people. He told her about Earth, about human families and traditions, about the concept of marriage as a public declaration of commitment between two people who choose to build a life together. "If we survive," Yuna said, "I want to learn more about being human. I want to choose my own path instead of following the one my people planned for me. And I want to learn more about being Astari," Minho replied, "about seeing the universe through your eyes, about understanding connections between minds and hearts." Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the attack ended. Commander Daewon's voice came over the communication system. "All clear. Pure galaxy. Forces have been driven off by reinforcements from the Galactic Security Fleet. The station is secure." As beings began to emerge from the emergency shelter, they were different than they had been before the attack. The shared experience of facing death together had created bonds that crossed species lines, but Minho knew that the real battle was just beginning. The recording of his whispered proposal and Yuna's acceptance would soon reach the ears of people who would use it to destroy everything they had worked for. The question now was whether the connections they had forged in the darkness of the emergency shelter would be strong enough to survive the political storm that was coming. Within hours of the emergency shelter recording being discovered, everything changed. Admiral Song Minkyung arrived on Harmony Station with a fleet of Earth military vessels and orders to end the diplomatic mission immediately. Commander Daewon had transmitted the recording of Minho's proposal and Yuna's acceptance directly to Earth Command, along with his recommendation that Captain Lee be court-martialed for compromising the negotiations. "You've lost your objectivity," Admiral Song told Minho in a private meeting in the station's command center. "Your emotional involvement with the alien delegate has made you unfit to represent humanity's interests." Minho stood at attention before his former mentor, feeling the weight of a military career that was about to end in disgrace. "With respect, Admiral, my feelings for Yuna haven't compromised my judgment. They've helped me understand what we're really fighting for." "What you're fighting for is irrelevant," Admiral Song replied coldly. "Earth sent you here to negotiate a trade agreement and military alliance. Instead, you've created a scandal that threatens our entire relationship with alien civilizations." Through the command center's windows, Minho could see Astari ships approaching the station. The main Astari fleet had arrived to retrieve their delegation, including Yuna. According to intelligence reports, they intended to take her back to their homeworld for correction therapy that would destroy her individual personality. "She'll die if she goes back with them," Minho said. "Or worse, they'll turn her into something that isn't her anymore." "That's not our problem," Admiral Song said. "Our problem is that you've jeopardized the peace treaty for the sake of an impossible romance." But as they spoke, something unexpected was happening in the main negotiation hall. Representatives from the other 10 alien species were holding an emergency session without human or Astari participation. Park Geo burst into the command center without announcing herself. "Admiral Captain, you need to see this," she said, activating the room's communication system. The main screen showed the negotiation hall, where delegates from 10 different species were engaged in heated discussions. The universal translators carried their words throughout the station. "The human captain and the Astari delegate have shown us something important," the lead Tlaxian representative was saying. "They have proven that beings from different worlds can form bonds that transcend political necessity. The pure galaxy terrorists attacked us because they fear exactly this kind of connection," added the Zephyrian delegate. "They know that love and friendship between species makes their message of isolation and hatred powerless. If we allow the humans and Astari to punish their people for forming an emotional bond," said the Corvan representative, "we are saying that individual choice has no value. We are agreeing with the terrorists that separation is better than cooperation." Dr. Cho Tai-hyun, who had been monitoring the discussions, turned to Admiral Song. "Admiral, they're proposing to add a new section to the peace treaty, something called the individual choice doctrine." Admiral Song frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means the right of any sentient being to form personal relationships across species lines, and the protection of those relationships under galactic law," Dr. Cho explained. "They want to make what Captain Lee and Yuna have discovered a fundamental right for all beings." The communication system crackled, and Nam Hyunwoo's voice came through. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Astari fleet commander. He's demanding immediate custody of their delegate." "Put it through," Admiral Song ordered. The screen changed to show an Astari military commander, his pale features rigid with authority. "Human leaders, you will surrender the defective Astari known as Yuna immediately. She has violated our laws by forming inappropriate connections with alien beings. She must return for correction." "And if we refuse?" Admiral Song asked. "Then the Astari Empire will withdraw from all negotiations and consider any further protection of the defective individual an act of war." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in silence. Through the windows, more Astari ships were arriving, their weapon systems powered and ready. "They're serious," Admiral Song said quietly. "If we protect her, it could mean war between Earth and the Astari Empire. Then we don't protect just her," Minho said suddenly. "We protect the principle." "What principle?" The one that says every sentient being has the right to choose their own path in life. The one that says love is stronger than politics. Minho activated the communication system. Nam, patch me through to all delegations and ships in the system. Captain, you're relieved of duty, Admiral Song said sharply. With respect, Admiral, I'm still the designated human representative until the peace treaty is signed or abandoned. I have the authority to make one final statement. Admiral Song hesitated, then nodded. Make it quick. Minho's voice carried to every ship and delegation in the system. This is Captain Lee Minho speaking for humanity. We came here to build bridges between civilizations, to create peace through understanding. But peace built on the sacrifice of individual rights is not real peace. On the main screen, they could see delegates from various species listening intently. The woman I love is being threatened with punishment for the crime of thinking independently, for forming connections with beings her government doesn't approve of. If we allow this to happen, we're saying that governments have the right to control not just our actions but our hearts. In the negotiation hall, several delegates stood up indicating their support. I propose that we sign the peace treaty with the individual choice doctrine included, or we don't sign it at all. Let the galaxy know that civilized beings protect the right to love freely, regardless of species or politics. The response was immediate. Representatives from 9 species voted to support the doctrine. Only the Astari delegation remained silent. But then something unprecedented happened. Yuna entered the negotiation hall, no longer wearing her diplomatic robes but dressed in simple human clothing. She walked to the center of the room and activated the translation system. I am Yuna of the Astari people, she said, her voice carrying to every ship in the system. I reject my government's authority over my thoughts and feelings. I choose to think independently. I choose to love freely. And I choose to remain here, with the beings who accept me as I am. The Astari fleet commander's voice came through the communication system, filled with rage. Defective unit, you will return immediately or face permanent exile and the destruction of your family connections. Then I choose exile, Yuna replied, calmly. I choose to build new family connections with beings who value individual choice over collective conformity. In the command center, Admiral Song watched as representatives from 10 different species rose to applaud Yuna's declaration. Even some of the younger Astari delegates appeared to be applauding, though they tried to hide it from their commanders. Admiral, Dr. Cho said, reading the incoming communication signals, we're receiving support messages from civilian populations on 12 different worlds. The story of the human captain and the Astari exile is spreading through civilian communication. Networks faster than governments can stop it. Admiral Song looked at the displays showing popular support growing throughout the galaxy. Young beings from dozens of species were expressing solidarity with Minho and Yuna's right to choose love over political convenience. This is bigger than a diplomatic scandal, she realized. This is becoming a movement. The final vote was overwhelming. 11 species signed the peace treaty with the individual choice doctrine included. The Astari government, facing massive civil protests on their homeworlds from citizens inspired by Yuna's courage, reluctantly agreed to sign as well, though they maintained their right to exile citizens who violated their social norms. The wedding ceremony took place 3 months later in the same negotiation hall where the treaty had been signed. Representatives from all 12 species attended, making it the first officially recognized interspecies marriage in galactic history. Minho wore his dress uniform, while Yuna wore a combination of human wedding dress and Astari ceremonial robes that she had designed herself. The ceremony included traditions from both their cultures, as well as elements contributed by their alien friends. Do you, Lee Minho of Earth, take Yuna of the Stars to be your partner in all things? Asked Dr. Cho Tae-hyun, who had been ordained as an interfaith minister for the occasion. I do, Minho replied. Do you, Yuna, formerly of the Astari Empire and now of the Free Galaxy, take Lee Minho to be your partner in all things? I do, Yuna said in perfect Korean, then repeated it in 11 other languages for the benefit of their diverse audience. The celebration lasted for 3 days, with beings from across the galaxy arriving to witness the historic event. Songs were written, stories were told, and children from dozens of species learned about the human captain and the alien bride who proved that love could change the universe. 5 years later, Minho and Yuna established the Harmony Institute on what had been renamed Peace Station. The institute became the galaxy's premier training center for interspecies diplomacy, where representatives from all civilizations learned not just to negotiate with each other, but to understand each other as individuals. Their first child, a daughter with her mother's violet eyes and her father's